This is the best
Do you hear me?
of the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
And we welcome you to another day. How are you on this Thursday? A lot to do today. We'll keep up with, obviously, all the things that are going on, including the Masters, in case you haven't heard. We welcome you back after a couple of, well, nobody's been off for a couple of days other than one of our compatriots, but we'll bring him in just a moment. But before we do that, why don't we get to some headlines? The ESPN Football Power Index is out. And guess who's at the top? How about them Georgia Bulldogs? Sorry, Nick Saban. This looks at the schedule, and the schedule is ridiculously easy. Austin Peay, that's a slam dunk. South Carolina, I've been talking about that game as maybe being a difficult game. Well, it would rank among the most difficult games on the season, and the Bulldogs are given a 79% chance. At Missouri, it's 78%. Tennessee, 94%. At LSU, 77%. Florida, 79%. At Kentucky, 90%. Auburn at 67% is the toughest game on the schedule, followed behind, obviously, LSU, Missouri, and South Carolina. The schedule is ridiculously easy if you look at the Power Index. What about Bama? They're pretty heavy favorite in every game as well. So you look at it, Louisville, that's an 87%. At Arkansas, 89%. At Tennessee, 89%. At LSU, 78%. Mississippi State, 79%. Auburn is the most difficult game on the schedule. It is at home, and that is a 67%. So statistically, Georgia a little more of a favorite probably because of the schedule, but statistically, though, it's pretty much a dead heat. Meanwhile, Alabama changes title of barbershop show, releases new video. It was Shop Talk. Now it's Bama Cuts. Is this because of LeBron James? Yep, bet it is. So who won that battle? Was it Saban, as many people suspected, or did LeBron end up having his way? We shall find out. Meanwhile, down in Bama, beset by injuries, Auburn remains a mystery this spring. Auburn's spring game is this weekend, and we will talk to Gus Malzahn on Friday. Meanwhile, Ohio State has rewarded Urban Meyer. Well, he's done well. Hasn't won a championship since 2014, but still, he will make $7.6 million this season. That is a raise. His athletic director, remember Gene Smith, he said this a few months ago that Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban's salaries are ridiculous. And now the same man who said they are ridiculous is giving his man a $7.6 million pay increase. Remember Gene Smith at the time said, I don't even put A&M in our sphere because I'm considering Urban Meyer's situation with 3 years left on his contract. So Gene Smith obviously talking out of both sides of his mouth. Anyway, welcome to the show. We are going to take your phone calls at 855-242-7285. People always say, how do you get in? You call early, and we will get you on as quickly as possible. Who will we speak with tonight? Brad Edwards on the SEC FPI. Booger McFarland. We'll get his talk on the upcoming college football season. He's also watching a lot of golf today, as is Steve Spurrier, the ambassador. He'll join us later in the program.
Quiet, please. This is your A-Block call segment. On the phone, from Morris, Alabama, Brandon Rogers.
And we welcome Brandon to
What's going on, Paul?
the program.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction.
Thank you, Brandon. Welcome to the show, my good friend.
A couple of topics, if you don't mind. Really quick, the two assistants that Alabama hired during the offseason, I wanted to get your thoughts on them. One of them was from Texas Tech, and one of them was from Penn State. Do you think that, I guess in the back of my mind, I'm wondering their experience levels, number one?
Well, I tell you why Saban brought them in. He was looking to shake things up. And I know this sounds crazy after coming off of a national championship season, but Nick Saban felt like some of his recruiters were getting stale. He was losing a couple of players normally that would have gone to Alabama, so he brought these two gentlemen in. And I'm not in Tuscaloosa, as you well know, but the people that are in Tuscaloosa and with whom I have spoken believe that things are different in T-Town right now.
Yeah, that's what I was reading on a SI article. And also, I think the guy from Penn State is supposed to be quoted as a really good recruiter. Is that right?
Yes. I think both had everything to do with recruiting, and that's where Saban starts and finishes when it comes to and again, that shows you Brandon, thanks for the call, but shows you the genius of Nick Saban when he's unhappy after winning a national championship because he felt like his program may have slipped ever so much in recruiting. Again, the phone number here is 855-242-7285, and we realize it's a busy day for everyone, so thanks for listening and watching.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
We were talking about the FPI, and before we get too deep into the story, we are going to welcome in Brad Edwards. Brad, thank you for coming on today. And before people get carried away with the headline here, explain exactly what this is.
Paul, the math is very complicated, but let's forget about that and just focus on what it's looking at, because FPI is looking at the same things that we all talk about all offseason, the things we use to determine which teams are going to be good. We're looking at not only how good was a team last year, but how good have they been, how consistent have they been over the last 4 years, because I'm more likely to trust a team that's been good for all four than one just that rose up and played really well for one season a year ago. And so that's the first thing it's looking at. The second thing is returning starters, which is a staple for all of us. How good are they going to be? Well, how many starters they have back? And if the quarterback is one of your returning starters, FPI gives a little bit of a bonus for that. The quarterback counts as more than one returning starter. Is the coach back? If you were good and your coach is still there, then there is that stability that you're looking for. If you're good like UCF was a year ago and your coach leaves, you're going to take a hit for that. And then the fourth thing is recruiting. It's a very, very minor factor, but we do look at the last four recruiting classes because our observation has been that if you have a lot of 4 and 5 stars out there, then you have quality depth, guys who were probably in the rotation, and even though they might be a first-year starter, they actually have played a lot of snaps up to this point, so you might have more experience than another team that returns the same number of starters. That's what goes into all this. Okay, so
Georgia has a slight edge over Alabama. You've probably answered the question somewhat in your previous answer, but should people read much into that, or is it just simply a matter of schedule?
Yeah, Georgia has a slight edge in terms of chance to win the SEC. FBI would tell you that if those teams played, let's just say the season opener, on a neutral field, Alabama should be a slight favorite. FBI thinks Alabama is just a tiny bit better than Georgia. The reason Georgia's favored to win the SEC is because, very clearly, to win the conference championship game, you have to get there first. And Georgia's path coming through the East to get into that game is easier than Alabama's. Georgia's chance to win the division, I think, is like 75% compared to somewhere around 63% for Alabama to win the West. That's why Georgia's considered the SEC favorite, not because FPI thinks that Georgia would beat Alabama on a neutral field. It's more like that Georgia's more likely to be there in that game than Alabama is. Not by a lot, but just because Alabama has a few more games that are conceivably losable along the way.
But we looked at both Alabama and Georgia's schedule, and you have to look pretty hard, Brad, to find losable games, don't you?
You do. And sometimes, Paul, we make the mistake of looking at teams before the season starts, and we just assume if they're really good, they aren't going to lose at home. But we've seen Alabama national championship teams in recent years that lost at home to Ole Miss, at home to Texas A&M. Actually, the team that lost to Ole Miss didn't win the national championship, but they made the playoff. But we saw them lose to A&M, lose to LSU at home, go on to win the national title. So maybe we shouldn't take for granted the home games for Alabama. But when we get in that mode and we're just assuming home wins, You look at the road schedule, I mean, really, LSU is the one that's kind of scariest to you based on what you think you know about these teams, and that's really based on history. As you've probably seen in this, Paul, FPI is not big on LSU this year at all. In fact, since Les Miles took over in 2005, this is only the second time that LSU has been ranked outside of the preseason top 12 by FPI. It's the first time that they've not been in the preseason top 25. They're sitting just out of it at number 26, and they have a brutal schedule. I'm not saying that affects what will happen in a one-game situation against Alabama.
Yeah, Brady,
but LSU is an underdog in 7 games by FPI.
Yeah, let's take a look at the schedule because you can draw a lot of conclusions with a headline, but some of these are pretty close. But this is not a good look for Ed Orgeron's team. In terms of, I'm going to go through it, and I don't know if I have the percentage here, but of these games, I'll give you the tough games. I'm pretty sure they're underdogs in all of them. Miami, Auburn, at Florida, Georgia State, Alabama, A&M. I mean, your best recollection, because I don't have your numbers.
No, and that's what you're looking at, and then you've got others like at Arkansas. Even though we're expecting Arkansas to be down, that's not one that would surprise me if LSU were to lose it. And you see it right there, the fifth toughest schedule in the nation, and 6-6 is what we're looking at as a projected record for LSU, that's inconceivable based on what LSU has been for pretty much this century. And so if it were to play out that way, and that's just a projection, it's based on all the simulations that are run. The majority of times it ends up in that area, 6-6. That's not to say that they're not capable of being 2 or 3 wins better than that, or 2 or 3 wins worse. I don't know that it could necessarily go that far down, considering some of the games are on there that they absolutely should win. But after what happened last year against Troy, are you going to take very many games for granted on that schedule? I think LSU has a lot to prove.
No doubt. So Auburn would be next, and then was it Florida and Mississippi State? Is that right?
Yeah, in terms of the SEC.
Right.
Yeah, so Auburn's sitting there at number 7. So Alabama's 2 nationally, Georgia's 3. Auburn is 7. And because Washington, who Auburn opens the season against, is number 6, Auburn has 3 opponents that are ranked in the top 6. And even though they don't sit up there in the overall schedule strength department, there are 3 matchups of top 7 teams based on the preseason FPI, and Auburn is playing in all 3 of those games. So it gives you an idea of what type of impact Auburn's likely to have on the playoff race, even if they're not in it. To get into the playoff, at least one team, the SEC champion, and maybe 2, if Washington comes out of the Pac-12, will probably have to come through Auburn to get there. Same thing is true with Ohio State in the Big Ten. Actually, what FPI tells us are the 6 most significant games of the college football season. Auburn plays in 3 of them. Ohio State plays in the other 3, which are their games at Penn State, at Michigan State, and then home against Michigan. So those 2 teams, Auburn and Ohio State, are going to have a lot to say about who ends up in the playoff. Kind
of business as usual. Last year, Auburn had Clemson, Alabama, and Georgia. It was a similar situation.
Yeah, and look, and because Auburn has the Alabama and Georgia games on the road this year, I would think that they'll be in a very similar situation to what they were last year, which is that even if they lose 2 games, if they win the SEC, I think they'll still have enough to get in the playoff. We didn't actually see it happen last year, but considering where they were going into the SEC championship game, I think we're all pretty certain that if they won that game, they would have been the first 2-loss team to make the playoff. And so I think if you're Auburn, the Washington game isn't necessarily as important as it is to beat either Alabama or Georgia on the road. They're going to and obviously the Alabama game, because of the division, is the more important of those 2.
And we'll talk to Coach Malzahn tomorrow, but let me go back to that Washington game beginning of the year. We know Washington's good, but where are they in your ranking?
Yeah, they're number 6 overall, and that might be a little bit higher than you see them in the polls when the preseason polls start to come out. But they do have a lot of experience back on offense. Last year they had some inexperience in the secondary, but they've got most of their guys back on defense as well. Some really big losses, especially one big one who you're probably going to see taken in the first round of the NFL draft inside at defensive tackle. But Washington's still a very talented team, and obviously a very well-coached team with Chris Peterson. They might not, recruit at the same level as USC does, but still a talented team. Look, we saw just 2 years ago in the playoff game against Alabama, if not for a defensive touchdown late in the first half, that game probably would have gotten pretty uncomfortable for Alabama in the fourth quarter. It's not to say they would have lost without that. But I think Washington showed that even against a team that had more talent than they did, they had enough to hang in there without a critical mistake. And so if they don't make that critical mistake against Auburn, I give them a good chance in that game, even though, we call it neutral site. I think we all know that Auburn playing in Atlanta is going to be far from a 50-50 crowd. Let's just put it that way. By the way, Auburn playing 3 straight games in that building. That's kind of crazy when you think about it.
It really is. It's the kind of thing you expect from Alabama.
Yeah.
I think we had that with Alabama.
Yes. Yeah.
Was it last year? Yeah, I think Alabama played in the SEC championship game. They played not 3 straight, but one of the years they played SEC championship game. They played in the playoffs, and they opened the season in the same place. But, you expect that. Brad, we appreciate it, as always. You gave us something to chew on while Tiger Woods was finishing his round.
At least you don't have to talk about the Big 12 anymore.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
You're not worth a flip.
Booger McFarland joining us. We're going to get to the LSU numbers in a minute, but we first want to just listen. It's what time is it? It's 4:30 in New York. Booger, I saw you on my TV at 7 o'clock this morning. I know you get up early because we got up early together every Sunday this fall, but getting up every day at 4 o'clock in the morning, are you getting sick of that?
Well, I don't get up at 4. I wake up at 4:40.
Okay.
And we have our first meeting at 5:15. So it's not that bad.
Oh.
I'm a morning person.
Okay. I knew, but that's still kind of early.
Yeah, it's a little early for you, Paul, but for me, it's not bad.
Okay. Well, I'm not used to working that hard.
Hey, trust me, when you got to get up every morning and talk to Greeny and Beetle and Jalen at 7 a.m., yeah, that's work.
I was about to say you couldn't pay me, but I think I can think of a number you probably could pay me to do that.
Exactly.
What's it been like? And we'll move on to football, but for those who don't know what we're talking about, Booger has been at the desk all week of this new Get Up show with Mike Greenberg on ESPN.
It's fun, Paul. You get a chance to launch a show, and obviously there's the newness of it, but there's also the kinks and things that you got to work out. We're starting a new show, so 4 days in, we're still on the air, so that's a good thing, and the show's getting better and better, so I can't wait for tomorrow to finish out the week.
No, it has definitely gotten better. You're right. I thought the Seth Meyers today, was really funny. Seth MacFarlane, Myers, who cares? It was still funny.
It was.
Let me ask you, before we get to football, since you're now Get Up's golf analyst, since you can talk golf on ESPN, I can get your golf impressions of Tiger today. Closed with 2 birdies on the final couple of holes to save what looked like it was going to be an out of control round. What did you think?
Paul, Bobby Jones said it best. There's golf and then there's tournament golf, and the two are not alike. And for some reason, when Tiger Woods gets in these big tournaments, he puts a lot of pressure on himself. He's yet to hit that first fairway at the Masters in a long time. And he just starts kind of swinging out of sync. And I thought, he does the one thing that a lot of golfers don't do. Sergio wound up making a 13 on the hole today, and Tiger just kind of will never get to that point because he'll never let it go. And he's always going to fight. He's always going to scrap, and he's going to get every ounce that he can out of a round. And I thought today, without birding any of the par 5, shooting 1 over par, as bad as he played, was not bad. And I think he's only 4 to 5 shots off the lead, and he's probably going to be right there tomorrow. He's got to come out and play better tomorrow, though, Paul.
So, Booger, do I understand correctly you and Kelly Ripa are going to a spin class as soon as you hang up here?
Well, I don't know if Kelly Ripa's going to be there.
It sounds like something she would be doing.
I am going to a spin class, Paul, because here's the thing. I like to run outside.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing about being in the Northeast, Paul. It's 34 degrees outside, so Bull don't do cold weather. So I'm going to a spin class. This flywheel spin stuff is kind of pretty new to Bull. You walk in there, they give you a bike, and there's about 50 other people in there. Most of them don't have many clothes on, and there's an instructor screaming, ride. And it's kind of pretty new, and I'm enjoying it. So I'm going to give it another try today.
I just checked the forecast here, Boog. 73 and sunny tomorrow if you want to get out of there early.
Trust me, I'm trying to book an earlier flight right now.
Talking to Booger McFarland. Booger, we just showed a number. The FPI's out. I know you don't cover college football anymore. You've gone Hollywood on us. But the FPI is projecting that LSU, what's the number, Mark, will be an underdog in more than half of the games. They're favored right now in only 5 games in 2018. You know this program inside and out. Assuming the FPI is actually correct, the projected win-loss record is 6-6. How is this going to play on the Bayou?
Well, if LSU were to finish 6-6, you and I both know it's not going to play well. And when you look at their schedule, Paul, with Georgia, Miami, Alabama, Auburn, A&M, it's a loaded schedule. We thought last year's schedule was tough. This year's schedule, if it's not the toughest in America, it's one of the top 2 or 3, and they got their work cut out for them. They got a new offensive coordinator. Ed Ogeron has recruited pretty well. The defense is back. They're paying around the $2.5 million. So this is definitely a year where the pressure cooker is definitely going to get turned up, and the schedule is not going to do them any favors. They're going to have to play a lot of good football to win against that schedule, Paul.
I mean, Booger, we know how long it's been since LSU has beaten Alabama, since they've been to the championship. I mean, everybody knows all of that. Are the expectations being lessened at LSU, or are things still the same as they've been for the last 15 years? LSU is supposed to be a championship team.
It's supposed to be a championship team, Paul. The expectations will never go down. Not when you have the caliber of players that grow in the state of Louisiana. Not when the expectations of the fans are what they are. They are not going to go down, and there's no reason that LSU should not win. I understand the schedule is tough. I understand that there are a lot of people wanting and look for bigger and better things. But when you look at what LSU is paying their defensive coordinator, when you look at the talent that they have on the football team and the recruiting classes that they're getting coming in, there's no excuses for not winning. They got a brand new football facility being built. They're going to have top-of-the-line facilities once again, even though they've kind of fallen behind the last couple of years. So there are no excuses. And I don't think anybody in Baton Rouge are going to make any excuses, especially right now in April.
And it is April, so I don't want to make too much out of anything, except this is a crazy time of the year that we look ahead. Assuming that you would agree that Alabama and Georgia are the teams to beat, who else do you see ascending in that direction?
I think you got to look at Alabama. You got to look at Georgia. You got to look at Auburn. With everything that they have coming back. You probably got to look at A&M. I'm going to give Jimbo the benefit of the doubt, Paul, and here's why. Jimbo recognizes the one issue and the one problem that Texas A&M has, and that's that they're not very tough. And he looked me dead in the eye, and he said that. He said, I know my team isn't tough, and I'm going to fix it. And so that was about 2 or 3 months ago. And so by the time we get to September, that would have been 9 months. And he will have one monumental task, which is to fix A&M's toughness. If he can do that, A&M is going to be pretty good. And I'll tell you another team, Paul, that I was very impressed with. And 2 years ago I wasn't, because their defense was terrible 2 years ago. And I think over the last year and a half plus, they've gotten a lot better. I'm expecting big things from South Carolina. And I can tell you from having been in Columbia this past weekend, they are circling, I believe it's the second Saturday in September, or maybe third when they play Georgia. They are circling that date, and they are looking forward to it in Columbia, South Carolina.
Winnable game then, right?
I don't know if it's winnable, but they think it is. That's all that matters. I think that's the one thing that matters, Paul, is they think it's winnable. They got a quarterback that I happen to be on the field because we did the whole referee thing, and right. I just listened and talked to Jake Bentley, and you just watched his mannerism and you just watched his movement. Paul, I've never seen a young man play with as much confidence and a team rally around him the way I did Saturday up in South Carolina. They got their starting quarterback. Now, if they can just keep Deebo Samuel healthy, if they can get some pass rush on the outside on defense, Will Muschamp was as relaxed as I've seen him since he first became a head coach. And I think if you're looking for a team that could come out of the pack and challenge a Georgia in the East, it may not be Tennessee, it may not be Florida. Watch out for South Carolina, Paul.
That's an interesting thought. On the other side, you mentioned Auburn. New coach at Mississippi State, but a pretty good team and a really good quarterback. Do you give them a chance to at least challenge for that second position?
I think Mississippi State is going to be pretty good. Anytime you have a returning quarterback coming back, that gives you a leg up on the field. I need to see how healthy Fitzy is. If Fitzy's healthy, they're going to play a tough, physical style of football. We know what they did at Penn State. They used Saquon Barkley a lot. How are they going to do that at Mississippi State? Because they don't have the dynamic running back at Mississippi State. They have a dynamic quarterback like McSorley at Penn State. So I think Mississippi State is going to be good. I don't know if they can challenge Alabama, and I think Auburn right now is still they have to be right there at number 2.
Booger McFarland, you'll see him at a theater near you opening next weekend. Booger, thank you. We'll let you get to spin class and rub shoulders with all the media elite in Manhattan. Thanks for the time.
Hey, Paul, by the way, have you ever taken a spin class?
I've never heard of one until 5 minutes ago.
Well, it's basically a room. They got about 50 bikes in a room, and they're all connected to a computer and a screen, and everybody comes in there, and they play music to get you pumped up and get you going. And so it's about 50 people in a small room riding a bike, and it's kind of warm in there. So the scenery is pretty good. You get a good workout, and you get to work out with a group of people. So it's kind of a different form of group fitness. I love it. I'm starting to kind of buy in, Paul.
Booger, I don't like being around that many people.
I hear you, buddy. Take it easy.
Thanks, Booger. We'll see you soon.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Everyone in the neighborhood knew about Bobby. Bobby, the basketball boy, they called him. Bobby wanted to go pro someday, so he was always out in the driveway shooting hoops. But one day, his mom came out and told him,
"Hey, your wife wants you to take out the trash?"
His mom was visiting, and Bobby was a grown man. He had kind of missed his window. Plus, no one had ever seen him actually make a basket. But on the other hand, Bobby had heard how Geico could save him money on car insurance, so he switched and saved. So it was all good.
Kelvin is up next. Good afternoon, Kelvin.
Hey, Mr. Coach Finebaum, how you doing today?
Quite well, thank you. What's going on?
Well, I just want to talk about the national championship game between Alabama and Georgia, looking at the quarterback situation. I saw in the game when the other quarterback came in, he did great, and they respected each other. Now I'm hearing that, whoever's going to start quarterback, that the other quarterback is going to leave. I don't believe that, because I saw between that championship game that they really respected each other, Coach, and that's all I got to say about that. Because I believe in both of them, and I love both of them as quarterbacks, and I think both of them will still be there.
Listen, I have no earthly idea, Kelvin. If I had to bet today, I bet both are there at the beginning of the season. I bet we see both of them, but it's always hard to predict what a 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old is going to do. But I think right now, though, if you're Tua, you're basically playing the game that Jalen will play one more year and go pro anyway. Okay,
I agree with that, Coach. But I'm a first-time caller, and I really enjoy your show. I watch it every day. And thanks for accepting me in, and I will give you more calls in the near future.
Thank you very much. And that would be the argument there. But why would you leave and sit out a year when you're probably going to be the quarterback the following year anyway? And you may be the quarterback this year. May is up next in Louisiana. May, welcome to the show.
Well, I cannot believe that I'm on the air. I have tried a long time to get on. Paul, I'm going to be 77 years old. And I always uplift players and kids and all that. And you just put LSU down constantly. You're already judging that Coach Orgeron's going to be out going again, just like you did for Miles.
Well, May, allow me to interrupt one thing, because I you can say whatever you want, but you can't say things that aren't true. And I've never said that Ed Orgeron is going to be out. By the way, I did predict that Les Miles was going to be out. And guess what? He was out. Next.
Yeah. Hello?
Yeah, no, I'm still here. I just wanted to make sure we corrected that.
Yeah. Well, the way you talk about Orgeron, it's indicating that.
Well, May, let me ask you a question. What have I said about Ed Orgeron specifically that you find objectionable?
Well, you said something early today on there. I can't exactly remember the exact words you said, but it was like, he was on the hot seat, but he's not up there. So I just think we should back these kids no matter who they play for. And honestly, I think you're very biased toward Alabama. And I mean, if that's your team, that's fine. But I think this network.
By the way, May, let me correct you. That's not my team. That's not my team. I went to the University of Tennessee.
Yeah, but you talk about Tennessee like you do LSU, so that's not saying very much.
May, let me explain something to you, okay?
Sure.
I have a job that essentially has me hosting a show talking about a number of different subjects. My job is not to enable people. It's to have an honest conversation here about a game that we all love. I have said countless times, and I'll say countless more, that I have great affection for Ed Orgeron. Would I have hired him? That's a matter of opinion. I probably wouldn't have, but the fans of LSU like him. They want him to succeed. The questions I have raised are the decision making that he has had in hiring Matt Canada and losing him after one season, and the fact that he elevated Steve Ensminger. He elevated Steve Ensminger. He elevated a man that nobody wanted as offensive coordinator other than Ed Orgeron.
Well, I don't. And just like you said, do they have a quarterback? Yeah, they got 3 pretty good ones out there, but he's really not going to name until starting day. What about Saban? Saban don't name them till the day they play. I mean, it's sir?
May, it doesn't matter to me when he names the starting quarterback, whether it's Brennan or someone else. It doesn't matter to me. I wouldn't name the starting quarterback until the first game anyway. That's a smart thing to do.
Well, you're right. That's what I believe. You know.
But I mean, I'm just simply responding to you, insinuating that I have something against a man that I don't. That's all.
Yeah. Well, it's just the way you come over and saying things, and that's what I believe.
What else?
And there's a lot of people believe that.
May, what else do I do that you don't like?
Oh, I'm not going to sit here and put you down.
Well, I mean, you're the one that called in and said I was biased. I'm trying to get better, so help me get unbiased, okay?
Well, you're smart enough to know.
So are you suggesting that I should say this? I should talk about LSU in the same with the same equanimity that I do Alabama?
No.
Okay.
No, we don't want to be put in that category. Look.
What category is that? Having won 5 of the last 9 national championships and having beaten LSU every year since 2011? Yeah. Is that the category that you don't want to be in?
I seem to think this year it's sports. It's not like we have to win, you know. It's really nice to win them, but I think everybody ought to get a good chance, at it. Don't you think?
May, I've been to Tiger Stadium. I've been to Tiger Stadium dozens of, if not 50 or 100 times, and
it's a great place to be.
It is. It's one of my favorite places. I think the fans there want to win. They expect to win.
Well, yeah, we do, but not every year. You got to give these other teams. You know what it's going to be? Just like the years that Bryant was there. Nobody wanted to go play because you knew you were going to get beaten. It's like, I don't know.
So LSU has lost 7 straight times to Alabama. Do you think that's good?
Well, I think maybe this year will be different.
And you're basing that on what?
Well, just what we've been hearing in the state.
And what have you been hearing?
Well, we got 3 good quarterback prospects and wide receivers, and the defensive lines could be great. And so far this year, we've been hearing a lot of good things about the offense. So, what you been hearing?
I just talked to Booger McFarland, who knows more than me.
I watched it.
And he thinks it could be a tough year.
Yeah. Well, did you look at our schedule?
Well, that's part of the reason why we think it's going to be a tough year. But you're saying you're hearing a lot of good things. I'm just trying to find out where you're getting your information. That's all.
Well, we're listening to the TV locally. So I seem to think, well, listen, I appreciate you taking my call.
Okay, May.
And go Tigers.
Go Tigers.
You're listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast.
Put a little cherry on the top.
So delighted to welcome Steve Spurrier to the program. Always cool to have Coach on, and especially on a day when he might be watching golf. Coach Spurrier, a pleasure to have you on. What's going on?
Well, Paul, I had your show on for a minute ago, and McElroy kept talking, so I flipped it back over to the golf. And, so I'm watching Jordan Spieth get ready to hit a putt right now. One of the later holes out at Augusta.
Well, because you may have seen some of that. I mean, and you've managed quarterback situations quite well, and it's certainly always been a subject of great conversation. What do you do if you're Nick Saban with two really good quarterbacks?
Well, I think a lot of people have said it is Jalen Hurts is such a good athlete, and I mean, he can play running back, he can play tight end, up back, he can do all kinds of stuff. But that Tua can throw the ball. He's electrifying. You know what I mean? And I just think both of them can get on the field. It would be a good way to do it. But I don't know if that's the direction they're going to go. But I think most people would think that would solve the problem right there.
Coach, one more thing on that. A lot of speculation that both sides want an answer, and you've been there. I mean, you're ultimately the head coach, whether it's Steve Spurrier, a Hall of Fame coach, or Nick Saban, a Hall of Fame coach. I mean, how do you keep everybody at bay and drag this thing out? Because you really don't want to commit yourself, do you?
I don't think he has to say anything much right now. Before the season, a lot of times if we had two guys fighting for it, usually a week or two before the season starts, name one. Some coaches like to wait to the game itself. I don't know. I don't think it makes any difference either way, to tell you the truth. But I just think both of them will end up playing a lot in the coming year.
Talking to Steve Spurrier, I know you're going to. You've been a big help already to Dan Mullen at the University of Florida. I know you're going to take part in his coaching clinic. I think is it this weekend?
Yeah, Friday morning, 10:30 here at the indoor facility. So glad to say a few words to the high school coaches.
What would your assessment be so far of what you've seen on the practice field and of Coach Mullen? Obviously, we all know him well.
Yeah, Paul, there's a lot of enthusiasm down here. Dan is a down-to-earth guy. He's got enthusiasm. He's coaching. The receivers are getting coached like they hadn't been coached before, quarterbacks. So I told him when he got here, Florida's offense has been so stagnant, as you know. I think we were 116, 114, 112 the last 3 years. That America is going to think Dan Mullen is an offensive genius because we're going to get better on offense. And there's some talent here, too. There's a lot of talent, and I don't know which quarterback will play. There is definitely a competition going on right now about that. But Dan has said, hey, there's a lot of good ball players here. They're eager to learn. They want to do well. So there is a little air of excitement down here.
Coach, where did it go wrong? Because there's been a lot of talent there, but it just doesn't seem like it was done correctly or developed. I mean, this is the University of Florida, after all. I don't need to tell you.
Well, like I said, the offense was just not very good. 2 years ago, the defense was fifth in the nation, and Florida was winning Eastern divisions. Coach Mack won 2 divisions, which that's not too shabby right there. The game with Alabama wasn't competitive either one, but the offense just never could quite catch up. And then the first 2 years, Florida was winning every close game going. I think at one time they said the Gators had won 9 out of 10 games decided by 7 or less points. And then all of a sudden last year they lost a couple. We lost a couple to LSU and Texas A&M came in and beat us. So, and then the death threats, and then all of a sudden it blew up, and we got a new coach in here.
Coach, let me get your assessment of the SEC because there are new coaches everywhere, of course, at A&M, at Arkansas. We mentioned Florida, Tennessee. You know most of these guys, I assume. How long does it take? I realize every situation is different, But what would you tell fans of Tennessee, for example, who are coming off an 0-8 SEC mark?
Yeah, that was not a good year for the Vols. Well, I would tell the Vols you can't be any worse. That's for sure in conference play. So they got nowhere to go but up. But yeah, everybody wants to win, and everybody's doing all they can, and everybody usually preseason, optimism, hopes are high. But in the final analysis, everybody can't win because we all play each other. So it's not as easy as sometimes the fans think it is. And those teams that know how to win, have exceptional talent, a little bit better than the others, and have winning traditions, those are generally the ones that end up at the top. Looks like Georgia's going to be tough again with the way they're recruiting and so forth. And I think the Gators are going to fight for these this year also.
Do you really?
Well, they're going to fight for it. I don't know who's going to win it, but they got a fighting chance.
Talking to Steve Spurrier. Steve, before you go, I do want to ask you about this report a couple weeks ago. You know where I'm going here. A lot of speculation about you getting back into coaching with this new league. What is the latest there?
Okay, Paul, yeah, I have been asked about it, and I really like the concept they have going. It's called the Alliance of American Football. They got a TV deal with CBS. They want to have football games that last 2.5 hours instead of 4.5. Emphasis on safety. There'll be no kickoffs, no extra points, go for 2 every time. Some new rules in place. And, try not to stop the game with so many replays and commercials and all that kind of stuff. Keep the game moving. So that's the concept there. Who's going to play in the league? Mainly maybe players that got cut by the NFL teams or some guys that are out there right now that think they can play and probably can play. There's a thin line between guys that don't make the NFL and are good football players, as we all know. And there's really no minor league for football. If you don't make the NBA, you can go to Europe and play. Major League Baseball, they got minor leagues, guy can work his way up, so forth. So there's no competition the time this league is going to play. This alliance is mainly what it's called. The alliance is going to play in February, March, April. So they're not trying to challenge the NFL or college football. Just an opportunity for guys to play, and I think the American public has proven that they will watch a good football game if it's on television. So that's a whole lot I know about it right now.
Well, I mean, certainly you have interest. Have you been contacted? Mm-hmm. And if you are officially offered, will you accept?
Well, I've had some contact. I don't mind saying that, and we'll see how it plays out. We'll see how it plays out. I will say most of my close friends have said you ought to go for that thing. You need a challenge in life, and sometimes I think they may be right. But we'll see how it all plays out here in the next few days, okay?
Well, okay. I mean, so obviously you miss coaching.
Yeah, I miss the challenge. Yeah, I think maybe watching the Gator offense the last couple of years has given me an itch to try to do that again. But again, we'll see how it all plays out, Paul.
Okay, I don't want to negotiate on the air. You've given us the answer. No, we'll let you off the hook.
But yeah, I do have an interest in it. I can honestly say that.
Okay, well we hope you get back. We miss you. And
thank you. And I consider you a friend. Most everyone has said that. You ought to jump at that if you get a chance. So we'll see how it plays out.
Well, we can't wait. Coach, thanks for coming on.
Okay, Paul. Good to talk to you again.
You got it, Coach. Steve Spurrier in mid-season form, giving us the coach speak about wanting to get back in the game. Understand? Sounds like it's as close to a green light as possible there with Steve Spurrier.
Thank you for listening to the Paul Finebaum Show podcast. The Paul Finebaum Show airs weekdays on the SEC Network beginning at 3 Eastern.